Episode 5 of The Acolyte features a series of intense, fast-paced fight sequences. People involved with the show claimed that the fights presented in this particular episode would rival or even surpass the legendary Duel of the Fates from The Phantom Menace. Now, if I were being generous, I could see them comparing it because of how fast-paced these fights were. They were high-intensity, fast movements, and I could see where they thought a comparison could be made because The Phantom Menace itself is marked by how dramatic it is, how intense the choreography is, especially changing it up with the dual lightsaber that Darth Maul wielded against the two Jedi. I can sum up the battles in this episode by the simple phrase that it is all flash and no substance. There are inconsistencies all over the place in regards to force powers on both sides. In regards to the Sith, they really amped up his force abilities to such a degree that it didn't make sense later when he didn't make use of them, when he definitely would have needed to. So initially we're introduced to Darth Smilow Ren in episode 4. He's seen blasting away dozens of Jedi with this force wave. We never see him use that ability again, and it definitely would have been useful when Osha lures those giant moth creatures to attack him and they just carried him away. And I do feel like he could have exercised some of his incredible force abilities to defeat them. But also, many times it seemed the Jedi forgot that they could use the Force even without their lightsaber, which kept getting shorted out by the Sith with his Cortosis-infused helmet and gauntlet. The Jedi were initially taken aback when their lightsabers were shorted out and seemed to forget that the Force is their ally and never used any Force abilities in defense. In regards to the Cortosis, this is the first time this special ore has been seen in live action. I think general audiences would probably just assume it's something akin to Beskar, which has been used quite often across the Disney Plus shows. Cortosis, however, is an ore that was originally introduced in the Legends EU and, per the course for Disney, has since been stolen or repurposed for their new canon. I do think it added a compelling dynamic to the battle. However, as it was coupled with a predictable and shallow story and atrocious dialogue throughout, again it made the battle all flash and zero substance. There is one thing that I really appreciated from this episode in particular, and that was the performance of Manny Jacinto, who played the Sith, Khmer. He was very athletic in performing the choreography. Honestly, I feel like this show doesn't deserve him, as well as the actor who plays Sol. I feel like this show wastes their talent. And all I can think of is how much potential was wasted by the poor writing. These actors certainly deserved better, and so does the audience. So the Sith mentioned that his helmet could block Sol's ability to read his mind. Honestly, I feel like it's entirely unnecessary for them to have added, as a Dark Force user can prevent others from detecting their presence and reading their thoughts. We saw that demonstrated to great effect in the prequel trilogy, where Darth Sidious was able to mask his presence in the Force and his dark intentions and agenda from the Jedi, of which he had many encounters with. And we also saw this play out within the episode itself, because Darth Smiley was able to sneak up on the Jedi on the end of episode 4 and get the upper hand on them. So they weren't able to detect his presence then or at any other time when they encountered him before they knew who he was. So I thought, again, very inconsistent, and I feel like they just threw that line in there without thinking about it, without thinking about the implications. I do also want to talk about the reveal of the Sith. And I have to say, this was the most obvious person. I knew it was going to be him because of how obvious it was and because of how poor the writing has been. I've seen this play out in a very similar way when it came to Rings of Power Season 1 in regards to Halbrand. It was immediately apparent that Halbrand was Sauron. The first words out of his mouth were, "Looks can be deceiving," and there were other hints as well of his real identity. And I feel like it was playing out exactly like that in this show. We heard initially Khmer's thoughts about the Jedi that were not complimentary. He said peace is a lie, and that the Jedi justify their galactic dominance in the name of peace. So there were several lines that he said, and there was a moment of a brief physical altercation with May that demonstrated that he had some fighting skills. And the fact that he was conveniently tied up or out of the room when the Sith eventually revealed himself there were many who thought that it couldn't be him because of how obvious it was. I do think this is a very strange pattern for writers today, where they think they're being clever by painting the most obvious choice as not the choice, thinking that the audience will come to this conclusion because it's so obvious. Definitely is not intelligent, is not complex, and in a show that was hailed as a mystery thriller, I definitely would have expected much more intrigue and mystery and surprises. But this show has been anything but a mystery, laying out everything, being as predictable as possible. So overall, while this episode did provide some interesting action, it was unfortunately shallow and had little emotional impact. And once the fighting was over, we again had to divert to the poor storytelling and dialogue that has been par for the course for this entire season. In particular with the story of May, who has been flip-flopping all over the place in regards to her motivations and intentions. Just last episode, she had changed her mind in her quest of revenge, and instead of killing the Jedi Wookiee, she decided to abandon her quest to go after her sister and turn herself in to the Jedi. In episode 5, she immediately abandons that. She immediately gets into a confrontation with Jecki and doesn't say a word about her intention to turn herself in. They battle it out and she runs away. But at the end of episode 5, May is back on the track of her original mission. When she couldn't get her sister to join her, I have no idea why she decided it was a good idea to join Sol to pretend to be her sister, basically a parent trap scheme. And I guess it's so that she can kill Sol, but honestly, I have no idea at this point. She changes her mind so often. So the real issue surrounding these fights, though, is the context of it. It is just surrounded and built upon a foundation of subpar storytelling. It really diminishes the impact of these fights. And once the fights are over, there's also these moments where people have to speak and there's dialogue. And it is really confusing and clunky and centered around confusing character motivations. And again, these things really reduce the impact that these fights should have. It should be more than just flashing lightsabers and flashy choreography. So when comparing these fights to The Phantom Menace, there really is no contest. The poor writing in the show makes it hard for the audience to care about anything that's happening in the show, to really be invested in the characters and the Acolyte. Now, some have pointed to the emotional impact of the fallen Jedi, how dramatic their deaths were. And while I admit the decision to kill off some Jedi is commendable, unfortunately, because we're not fully invested in the characters themselves, their deaths feel hollow. With only a few episodes remaining, I'm left feeling doubtful that the remainder of the season will improve upon this problem. The problem at the heart of this show stems from the storytelling, and I do not see that improving moving forward. But I'm curious to know what you think about the fight scenes in episode 5 of The Acolyte. Is it at all appropriate to compare this to the Duel of the Fates? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more sci-fi and fantasy news and lore. And if you're looking for other ways to show your appreciation, you can check out my Patreon page, where members get access to exclusive content and perks. Thank you all so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.